Assalamu alaikum students. Welcome to another lecture of our CSS English essay lecture series. The topic which we are going to discuss today is how to write an argumentative essay. I have already told you in previous lectures what an argumentative essay is. Basically, it's when you are given a topic, a debatable topic, and you take a stance, you take a position, and then you defend it. So that is basically the crux of argumentative essay. But there is a subtle difference between an argumentative essay and a persuasive essay. Students and examiner often confuse argumentative essay with persuasive essay, but there is a slight difference, subtle, very subtle difference between the two. But at the end of the day, you will realize that when it comes to applicability, there is not much of a difference, only a definitional issue. It's only a definitional difference and a slight difference about the content. So I will elaborate this with example, or let's move forward so that this concept can be made much clearer. So this is today's it's a sort of specialized topic, so you have to keep very attentively, you have to be focused on the lecture. So first of all, what is the difference between an argumentative versus persuasive essay? So argumentative essay, as the word implies, that you are arguing about something. So when you give your points and then there are opposing points. That is how what an argument is basically. So let's just read with me. Argumentative essay presents arguments and refutes counter arguments. Let's suppose two people are arguing about a thing. So I would be arguing, you know I will be taking a stance and trying to prove my points, and the other person would be taking an opposing stance and would be trying to prove his points. Let's suppose the topic is, once again, I am taking the same topic throughout just to make it easier for you people to follow what are the concepts I'm talking about. So the topic is democracy no more vulnerable in Pakistan? Now let's suppose I'm talking about, I'm taking the side that yes, democracy is no more vulnerable in Pakistan. Now, there would be an opposing side which would be saying that no, democracy is still vulnerable in Pakistan. They might have their own arguments, and their arguments could be as strong as mine. But when you go for an essay with an argumentative approach, we have to write our stance, and then we also have to write the opposing stance, and of course we have to refute the opposing stance. And the whole purpose of this is, presenting an opposing stance and then refuting, is ultimately to strengthen our own argument. So this is what is actually an argumentative essay. Now let's come to persuasive essay. Now in persuasive essay, it is the same essay, the same topic. You can take the same topic, is democracy no more vulnerable in Pakistan, and let's suppose I'm taking a side that no, yes, democracy is no more vulnerable in Pakistan. But in this sort of essay, I won't be writing counter arguments. Okay, I will just ignore the opposing view. I will just begin my essay and write my own viewpoint, and prove my stance with different examples, quotes, statistics, quoting different authorities. So the only goal is to get the examiner on your side. And how you do this is, you do this by substantiating your own stance. Okay, you ignore the counter arguments which we present in argumentative essays. So that is the only difference between an argumentative and persuasive essays. Now the question which comes to mind is, which approach should you take? Now, after you have taken today's lecture, you would be in a much better position to judge yourself. Let's suppose the topic is democracy no more vulnerable in Pakistan. You can take either approach. Either you can just go with your arguments and ignore the counter arguments, or you can also take counter arguments into consideration and refute them. The examiner won't penalize you just because you haven't mentioned counter arguments and refuted them. No, that's not how it works. Now, when you should be using argumentative approach, or in other words, you should be presenting counter arguments and refuting them, is if you have certain criteria. You have strong grip about the topic. I mean, you are, well versed with all the aspects, all the facets of a particular topic. You know the how people are, they support this stance, what could be the opposing views, and you are able to refute the opposing. So you have a very strong and holistic grip about a topic. Okay, if you have, let's suppose, if you are brainstorming a topic and you are only coming up with the points which support your stance, and you're not coming up with points which are basically counter opinions, then you should go for persuasive approach. Okay, secondly, you should only go for argumentative essay if you can effectively nullify, counter, or refute the opposing opinions or counter arguments. Now, students make a lot of mistakes when they try to refute the counter arguments. For example, they have stated a counter argument, and in the refutation, they are not basically refuting this counter argument. They are writing something else, which is altogether different to the counter argument they have presented. So, only go for counter arguments if you have these three criteria, and one more, you have strong grip over English, because you don't want to overcomplicate things on the day when you're sitting for essay. It's only 3 hours. But having said that, today we are going to discuss about persuasive. Basically, the if when we are talking about the paragraphs which we are going to write to vindicate our stance, to prove our stance, that will fall in the category of both persuasive and argumentative essays. But when we will talk about counter arguments in this lecture, that comes into the domain of argumentative essays. But regardless of what approach you take, we will study today how to write counter arguments. Okay, you should know at least the techniques, okay, the formula, how to go about writing an counter argument and refuting it. And the ultimate purpose of writing counter arguments is to support your own thesis statement. So let's move on. I hope the difference is obvious and clear to you. But if you have any questions, we can address them at the end of the essay. So, argumentation. The aim of writing argumentative essays is to convince or persuade the reader or examiner. Okay, both in both cases, in by writing an persuasive essay or writing an argumentative essay, the aim, the end result which we want to achieve is to convince and persuade the reader about what? That our stance, our argument, our thesis statement which we have taken is strong. It stands on a strong footing. Okay, it is backed up. It's not just our opinion, but it's backed up by facts and statistics, quotes. So ultimate aim is same of both argumentative essays and persuasive essays. Just a slight, subtle difference about the approach. So one attempts to change the reader's mind and convince the reader to agree with the point of view or claim of the writer. So let's suppose the examiner is of the view that democracy is still vulnerable in Pakistan, and you have taken the stance that democracy is no more vulnerable in Pakistan. Excuse me. So you have to change the examiner's mind and convince him. And how do you convince him? As I have told you earlier, you have to present facts, you have to cite examples, you have to quote different authorities. So, excuse me, you use various techniques to convince yourself. So an argumentative essay needs to be highly persuasive and logical. And remember, this holds equally true for persuasive essay, because both are doing the same thing, at a basic level. The difference is that we only include counter arguments in an argumentative essay, while in a persuasive essay there are no counter arguments. So moving on. So these are some key terminologies, and if you note them down, these will help you when we will go on elaborating this lecture. We will go on discussing this lecture. So the first terminology which you need to know is argumentation. Okay, and what is argumentation? The act or process of forming reasons, drawing conclusions, and applying them to a case in discussion. Okay, so these are not in the order which is mentioned here, but just read it and guess what should be the order. Okay, argumentation goes for number 2. That is the order. Now cite here, look at these definitions and let's see what point basically is discussing refutation. Here, number 5. I hope you have guessed it. Refutation is basically the process of discrediting the arguments, okay, that oppose your thesis statement. So first you present counter argument and then you refute those counter arguments. And how you refute those? By discrediting the arguments that oppose your thesis statement. Okay. Now, who is a proponent? Someone who argues in favor of something, or someone, that is, we could be the proponent. We are defending our thesis statement, our stance. So we are proponents basically. Okay. And who is an opponent? A person who disagrees with something and speaks against it. And what are counter arguments? Number 4, point or statement in opposition to the argument being made in a written document. Okay, so the stance we have taken in the thesis statement and the opinions, the arguments which are against the stance which we have taken, they are called counter arguments. We will denote them with counter arguments. And what are pro arguments? They are basically, yeah, points or statements that support one's ideas or thesis statements. So once again, let's start it with another example. Who is a proponent? Someone who argues in favor of something. And who is an opponent? A person who disagrees with something and speaks against it. Now, what is a pro argument? A, it is a point or statement that suppose one's ideas or thesis statement. Now, what is a counter argument? It is a point or statement in opposition to the argument being made. That is the stance which we have taken. The opposing stance to our stance is basically called counter argument. And now, what is finally called refutation? Refutation is the process of discrediting the arguments that oppose your thesis statement. So that is the the actual numerical process. Proponent, opponent, pro argument, counter argument, and then we refute the counter argument. And this argumentation, this in general basically tells us about this whole process, what the argumentative essay or argumentation is all about. So I hope this is clear. These terminologies are clear to you. What are the goals of argumentation? To present an opinion on a debatable topic to the examiner. Now, the highlighted word debatable topic, this is very important. And what we do in our argumentative essay, we explain, clarify, and illustrate that opinion. Okay, with the opinion which is debatable, for example, is democracy no more vulnerable in Pakistan? It is a debatable topic. Some can go go for it, and some might go against it. Okay, so it is a debatable topic. And what we do in argumentative essay, we explain, clarify, and illustrate our position. And moving on, persuade the reader that the opinion is support the persuade the reader that the opinion supported in the essay is valid by moving the reader to action, convincing the reader that opinion is correct, persuading the reader that opinion is at least worth considering. So these are, the goals of an argumentative essay. Now here, this is the important thing. We support our stance by means of giving evidence. Okay, what does evidence contain? Facts, examples, description. We quote an authority and statistics, and we present counter arguments to the thesis statement, and finally we refute them respectfully and critically. Okay, when if you are presenting counter arguments, then you have to refute them in a very elaborate, critical, and respected manner. Okay, once you present a counter argument and you are not able to refute it, in a scholarly way, then it will not serve the purpose of, further strengthening your thesis statement or stance. Okay, that will go against the purpose of it, that will make it futile. So only go for counter arguments if you're sure that you can nullify them. Okay, with strong opinion, facts, and figures. I will talk about these in detail. I will give you examples in these lectures. So this is a method by which you can build a counter argument. If you're writing a paragraph, a counter argument paragraph, remember, counter argument paragraphs are different paragraphs and they have a different approach to them. Okay, so you just have to follow this formula. In the step one, this is your second sentence. Okay, choose one from the below styles. Many people believe. Now this is, sorry, this is not your second sentence, this is your first sentence of a counter argument paragraph. You can write that many people believe or argue or feel or think or suppose that. Now here you will be stating the counter argument that democracy is vulnerable. Let's suppose we have taken the stance that democracy is no more vulnerable, but we are writing a counter argument paragraph. So we will state it. The first sentence would be, many people believe that democracy is still vulnerable. Or we can, phrase it, the first sentence of our counter argument paragraph, by writing that it is often thought, supposed that, once again counter argument, democracy is still vulnerable. Or it would be easy to, or one could easily think, believe, imagine that democracy is still vulnerable. Or it might seem, appear, look as if democracy is still vulnerable. So these are just a few examples, four examples of a topic sentence. Okay, in our, remember we discussed that in body paragraph the first sentence is the topic sentence. Now in counter argument paragraph, the first sentence is also a topic sentence, but in that topic sentence you state the counter argument. Okay, that should be the first sentence. In the first sentence you state the counter argument. These are just the four examples, the ways in which you can state the counter argument. There can be many other ways you can introduce a counter argument. Okay, for example, many people believe that running can hurt your joints. Just keep this in mind and we will discuss the next step. Let's suppose our thesis statement, our stance is that running is good for, for physical health, but many people believe that running can hurt your joints, so probably you shouldn't go for running, you should go for a jog. Okay, so that could be our thesis statement and this probably could be the counter argument. Now this should be your second sentence. Okay, the previous one was to be your first sentence, this is the second sentence. Follow up with one of your reasons why their reason is wrong. Okay, this is the refutation part. You refute the counter argument. Now how can you do this? How can you phrase the sentence? What this argument overlooks, fails to consider, does not take into account is that now the situation has changed. Now there is an independent media which makes democracy no more vulnerable. So now you would be refuting the opposing view. Okay, and how could you phrase the second sentence? By using words like this. You could also say, This view seems, looks, sounds convincing, plausible, persuasive at first, but when we explore it in a bit more detail, we find that this opinion does not hold on its own, because once again the fact is that democracy is not vulnerable because of a strong civil society, independent judiciary, and media. Or you could also phrase it or structure it by stating something like, while this position is popular, it is not supported by the facts, it is not logical, it is impractical. Or you could also start by saying, although the core of this claim is valid, it suffers from a flaw in its reasoning. So in the fourth instance, you are basically questioning the reasoning of the counter argument or its application. So there are various ways in which you can counter or nullify a differing opinion or counter opinion, or the opinion which is opposed to your thesis statement. So, moving on with the same example, we can say that what this argument overlooks is that there are many ways to help overcome joint pain while still being able to continue running. So, here we have refuted the opposing view that, some people say that we shouldn't be running, we should just be jogging because running can hurt our joints. But here we have, this is the second sentence of our counter argument paragraph. We have said that what these people overlook is that joint pain can be overcome, okay, through different methods. So we have refuted the argument, counter argument. More on counter arguments in a separate lecture. Okay, this is the same lecture which I was talking about. Okay, so I hope you have got a picture of how to structure a counter argument. We will be discussing these. Yes, this is the sample introductory paragraph of a argumentative essay. Remember, this is just a sample. You can have your own. You can start it in your own way. Okay, so let's suppose the topic is advertising manipulates viewers. Just read the line in the this color. In the simplest form, advertising can be defined as a kind of message or transmission that is designed to promote a product. Now we have basically defined what an advertising is. Okay, now advertising is our main topic, and our thesis statement, which will define the scope of our essay, which will define the stance which we are taking, is this part, the second part. That is, it manipulates the viewers. Either it manipulates or not. We are going to take one stance, and here we will take the stance that yes, it manipulates the views. So we have started the introductory. Remember, this is the introductory paragraph of our essay. We have started by defining what is advertising. Then so this was definition. Then this was some facts. Remember, I told you that how we build our essay. So the text in green is basically the facts, how we are going about to prove our stance. Today, this basic marketing strategy has become a natural part of our daily life. Considering that the $120 billion spent on advertisements in 1999 had drastically risen to $500 billion in 2017, and that in the course of a lifetime, one will see about 3 years worth of advertisements on television and approximately 3,000 ads per day, a person may easily acknowledge the impact of advertising. So, here, by giving facts, we have established that advertising has an impact on viewers. Okay, so we have established a position that yes, advertising affects the views. Now we will be talking about how it manipulates them. Okay, the second part is we have quoted an authority to further beef up our stance. Okay, that advertising affects views. Nonetheless, as Noam Chomsky explains, advertising, which originally intended to be a source of information for people on the availability of products, has developed into an industry that shapes people's identity. That is very important. This is basically all about that advertising manipulates views. Coming in various forms, print, audio, or visual form, advertisements not only bombard audience with their messages, but they also sell the ideas of who we are and what we should do or be. So that is how advertising is manipulating us. Okay, they are imposing an identity upon us, okay, so that we can buy their products. They link these different things to our identity. I will discuss now. This is the view we have taken in our introductory paragraph, and I will be discussing some pro paragraphs that will be justifying our thesis. Now this is the thesis statement. Lastly, thus advertisements are harmful for the society owing to their disruptive influence. Now we have taken this stance, okay, that advertisements are disruptive to us. Now we can't waver from this stance. We will write counter arguments, but just to refute them and to prove our own point. So this is an example of an introductory paragraph of a argumentative essay, and same would hold true for a persuasive essay. The introductory paragraph, the paragraphs which we are writing to support our on or on stance, like pro paragraphs, are the same. The only difference is that of counter argument paragraph. So this equally holds true for persuasive essays. Moving on. Now this is a sample of a counter argument paragraph. Remember here, see, proponents of advertisements may, now this is the line I have in the text in the brackets. This is just for your information. This is not part of the paragraph. We have used the word may because we are anticipating the opposing argument. Now in an essay, there's no one standing in front of us and debating one on one. We are basically presuming what counter arguments could be, and then we are refuting them. So we have used the word may. You can use any other words. So proponents of advertisements may assert that consumers become more aware and conscious. This proposition goes on to say that advertisements help the undecided customers come to a decision seeing all the available products on the media. So this is an idea that is contrary to our thesis statement. Remember what was our thesis statement? That advertisement is harmful for the society. But this is a counter argument, okay? And it has some merits. So number one, we have stated the counter argument, and number two, in the blue text, we'll be showing the weakness of this opposing argument. This is one way to refute the argument. We show that there are various ways we can refute the counter argument, and this way is to show the weakness. So read the text in the blue. This point has merits on surface and could be acceptable to an extent, okay, to an extent, not fully. It is true that advertisements inform the consumers on the availability and variety of goods, yet that is where we are refuting. Serious doubts can be raised against this view when one considers the shortcomings of the messages the viewers are exposed to. That is where we are refuting it. We are saying basically that though the content, the opposing view holds true, that it provides the information, but the content which they provide, the shortcomings of the messages which the viewers are exposed to, they are dangerous. Now read the text in black. These are supporting sentences. Now we will be supporting our refuting sentence. These are the refuting sentences. Now we are further supporting them. Read it. The target audience, that is the consumers, are forced to believe in illusions about the product rather than the realities. When an advertiser focuses merely on the advantages of a product, it creates a false impression. Or when a commodity is equated with positive feelings such as happiness and self confidence, this image builds up a false hope that once you buy it, you will be happy and self confident. Eventually, when these illusions are not realized, as they have been lies of the advertiser all along, the consumer is disappointed. The advertiser achieves the ultimate end and turns a gear in the consumer market. But it is a deception that is ethically unacceptable. Consequently, the advertiser not only pushes the public deeper into consumption, but also disillusions it with false messages. Hence, it can be concluded that advertisements are detrimental. So, here, once again, we have validated our thesis statement, and we have given supporting sentences. Now, you could obviously relate it to your real world. You watch TV, and you can see that all the advertisements, they they bring out the advantages of the product, and they equate those with happiness, that if you buy this product, then you will be happy, and you won't be experiencing any difficulty. So these are the false illusions, okay? They are equated with our life. So that is how advertising is manipulating us. Though yes, we have stated that this point has some merit, that they provide information, but the content which the advertisers feed us with is not 100% accurate. They feed us with lies. So that is how we have stated a counter argument, stated it, refuted it, further supported the refutation, and then concluded it by linking it to our thesis statement that advertisement is harmful. Now this is the concluding paragraph, let's suppose, of the same argumentative essay. All in all, attempts trying to justify the benignity of advertisements are destined to be feeble, because advertisements cause apparent harm to public. These written, audio, or visual messages reinstate stereotypes and consequently annihilate greater gender equality. Now, I have skipped a couple of paragraphs. Let's suppose how they annihilate gender equality. Let's suppose if you view the ads in the TV, the role of women is often, most of the time, it's equated with women being restricted to house. Their role is explicitly in the house. Very few, advertisements are there which depict the woman in some professional life, okay? So they ultimately reinforce the stereotypes that the role of women is within the boundaries, four wall boundaries. So they further promote gender inequality, okay? So these are the various points which you could have written in your body paragraph, but I haven't mentioned those in here. I have just told you how to write a counter argument paragraph, and then I have written a sample concluding paragraph. So these are the points which are basically part of the various counter argument paragraphs. So you shouldn't get confused about where these terms are coming from, okay? Finally, advertisements exploit the future generations for their own end. Now I have also, there's also a paragraph about this, that how advertisement exploit the future generations and cause irreversible impairment on their health and psychology. Here, this is basically link signaling the conclusion, okay? The red, all in all, this is signifying that our essay is coming to an end, okay? We are going to a conclusion, and these statements, these are summary of the main points, summary of the body paragraphs which we have written, and this is an opinion of an authority which is an expert on the area of advertisements and the harmful effects of advertisements, okay? Bernhardt, okay? She's an expert on this field. So as Bernhardt remarks, the monster of advertisement, remember, ellipses, three dots, there is other information, other quotation. This excerpt is long, but that was not related to our essay, so we have ellipsed it, we have shortened it by placing an ellipsis. I've discussed this in some lectures. Some of you might have listened to that lecture and some of you not, but we use this to cut out that part of the quotation which is not relevant to our essay. So the monster of advertisement is a sort of octopus with immeasurable tentacles. the tentacles, the various feet it has. It throws out to right and left, in front and behind its clammy arms, and gathers in through its thousand little suckers all the gossip and slander and praise afloat to spit out against at the public. So this is a quote which basically visualizes how advertisement basically contracts you. It you know आपको घेर लेती है ये, in a sense. आपको आपको वो चीज करवाती है which you basically don't want to do. Okay. And finally, there's a warning. Therefore, we need to save ourselves from the evil tentacles of this monster and learn to make our own free choices before it is too late. So that is the conclusive conclusion of a sample argumentative essay. So this is just go through it. This is not very important. Stage one, choosing a topic. Of course, you will be given 10 topics and you will have to choose one in the CSS exam. Writing the thesis statement. Now, the thesis statement should define the scope of the argument and make the assertion that is open to debate. Of course, you should be choosing a side, a particular side. Either you will be on this side or you will be on this side. So that is what it means that you should write a thesis statement. And then you should be deciding on a debatable topic. That is, you should only be writing an argumentative. You can only write an argumentative about an essay which is debatable. Okay. I will explain this in more detail what this actually means. Okay, we should write an argumentative thesis statement and we should generate ideas. Now here are sample argumentative thesis statement. The thesis statements, these are sample thesis statements which can be written in a argumentative essay. Now the topic is, let's suppose something should be done on media bias. Okay, now read it. So presuming that you have read it, now what is the flaw with this particular thesis statement? Something should be done on media bias. Two flaws. Number one, it doesn't state clearly the writer's idea. I mean, what is that something that should be done, and who should do it? These are the things which are missing. So this could have been a debatable topic. Okay, that something should be done on media bias, but the thesis statement which the aspirant has produced is faulty. Okay. Now once again, a thesis statement of an argumentative essay. CNN is the best TV channel. Now, what this thesis statement, what are the flaws in this thesis statement? This is not an effective thesis statement. Why? This sentence is not debatable as it involves personal choice or preference. Now, you have stated that CNN is the best TV channel. Okay. Now, this is your personal choice, preference. Okay. Once you have established that CNN is the best TV channel, then you have stated your personal preference or your prejudice. So this is not a debatable thesis statement. Okay. Now moving on. There are three ways of media censorship. Now read this. This is not an argumentative thesis statement. Okay. This is a thesis statement. This is a good thesis statement because the examiner knows after reading this that you are going to discuss three ways. Okay. To counter you're going to discuss three ways of media censorship, that is how we can censor the media. But this is not an argumentative thesis statement because the aim of the writer is at listing the types of media censorship. Therefore the writer's purpose of writing this essay is not to persuade the writer but to give information. Also, the ways of media censorship are not open to debate, thus not suitable for argumentation. So, in this essay, the aspirant would simply be giving out the ways about media censorship. He won't be talking or arguing about whether there should be media censorship or not. Okay, that if that was the thesis statement, then it could have been an effective thesis statement. But no, that is not the case. In the essay, he's going to discuss about three ways in which media censorship can be done. So this is not an argumentative. This is a descriptive thesis statement. Now, once again, another thesis statement: newspapers should not identify people by color, race, or religious faith in any way. I will give you some time to read it. So just go through it. So why this is an effective thesis statement? Because it is open to discussion. And why it is open to discussion? Because there may be people who would oppose this argument, claiming that this kind of restriction would damage. Okay, now if you are, let's suppose, restricting that the reporting in newspapers shouldn't be, shouldn't identify with religious groups, but if an activity, or let's suppose, a harmful activity is perpetrated by a religious group, then you should be basically identifying it with that report. And if you don't, then the objectivity of the news is compromised. Okay, like let's suppose if someone is doing, take an example of America, and someone is stabbing someone. Okay, often there are examples that, people just, there are school shootings in US, okay, like in Texas or any other state, but they don't identify people that they are Christians. Okay, they simply say that, okay, there was a man. But when it comes to Muslim world, they are biased. When someone carries out such an attack, they most of the times they associate it with Islam or Muslims. So there is a bias. So either it should be done at a universal level, that the acts of various groups should be, recognized with their color, race, or religious faith, is a debatable topic whether it should be done or not. If it should be done, then it creates a bias. Okay, it might give an impression that you are against the people of color, or against some race, or against some religious groups. But if it is not allowed, then the principle of objectivity might be compromised. Let's suppose the people of a particular race are, you can say, aggressive by nature, but if you are just overlooking that fact because it might offend someone, then the principle of objectivity is compromised. So the crux is that this is an effective thesis statement because it is debatable. Okay, both sides of the arguments are debatable. You can take either stance and you can move on to elaborate it. Now, the difference between the expository thesis statement versus the argumentative thesis statement. Both expository and argumentative thesis statements express a certain opinion about a topic. However, an expository thesis statement does not include a sharp opinion. Rather, it discusses advantages, disadvantages, types, reasons, results, problems, solutions, processes, or categories of an issue, often in terms, often, often of an issue, often in the form of listing, enumeration, classification, sequencing. So the thesis statement of expository essays is not about opinions. It is about something else. And putting it in perspective of CSS, it is about the traditional essays like cause, effect, solutions. And what I recommend is that don't write it in outline, just an intro paragraph. In argumentative essays, it is good that once you write the heading in your outline of introduction, you write a one liner of your thesis statement, just to make the examiner clear of on what side of the fence you are when it comes to argumentative essays. But when it comes to expository essays, you don't have to write your thesis statement in the outline. Just start writing after the outline, the intro paragraph, and the last sentence of the introductory paragraph should be your thesis statement. So it is not advisable to write thesis statement in the outline of expository essays, because the examiner knows that you are going to discuss types, results, effects, causes, solutions in the essay. So you don't have to tell the examiner beforehand what should the examiner expect. While in an argumentative essay, you need to tell the examiner what to expect. That you need to make sure that the examiner is clear about your viewpoint right from the scratch. An argumentative thesis statement, on the other hand, has a clear stance on a debatable topic, fiercely argues the writer's opinion is correct and reflects the subjectivity both in style and tone. Write this one in the outline. So that thesis statement of an argumentative essay clearly states that this is a subjective topic and people can be on either side of the fence. So once again, there are three main reasons why the media manipulates the reasons. This is not an argumentative thesis statement. Okay, this is an expository thesis statement, because the essay would be stating the reasons, the three main reasons why media manipulates the news. It is not about an argument that whether media manipulates the news or not. No, the thesis statement is about the three main reasons. So we would be discussing 3 minutes. So this is not a thesis statement of an argumentative essay. This is a thesis statement of an expository essay. The media should not manipulate the news in any way. Now, this is an acceptable argumentative thesis statement. Once again, read the thesis statement. The media should not manipulate the thesis statement in any way. Not. Now, I could say that it should. So that makes it a debatable topic and hence a debatable and argumentative thesis statement. Okay. It is essential to be media literate for 3 reasons. Now, this is also an example of an expository thesis statement. Although the word includes essential, but when we state that one should be media literate for 3 reasons, then the examiner expects that the aspirant is going to write about 3 reasons. The essay is about 3 reasons why people should be media literate. It's not about whether they should be media literate or not. Okay, so it makes it an expository thesis statement and not an argumentative thesis statement. It is essential that media literacy be taught in schools. Now, this is clearly an example of a thesis statement, because this is a debatable topic. Okay, because why? Because the purpose of the essay is to convince the examiner that media literacy should be taught in the schools. Once again, read this thesis statement. It is essential that media literacy be taught in schools. Now, one can say that no, media literacy has nothing to do with nothing to do at the school level. So this is a debatable topic, and then it is a argumentative thesis statement. So why I am showing you these examples is because when you write the thesis statement of an argumentative essay, it should be a thesis statement which looks like an argumentative essay. Like, let's suppose the topic is democracy no more vulnerable in Pakistan, and in that essay I should also be writing the recommendations to make democracy to more effective or more strengthened. But how I will end my introductory paragraph is not by stating that the democracy can be strengthened in 3 ways or 4 ways. No, I will be ending my introductory paragraph by stating that democracy is no more vulnerable in Pakistan because of factors like strong media, independent judiciary. Although the last part of my actual essay would be about recommendations, but my thesis statement can never be about the recommendations, because the crux of my essay would be that is democracy vulnerable or not. So this is why I'm showing you the difference about expository and argumentative thesis statements. On the whole, while writing argumentative thesis statements, be sure to have a debatable topic. State your claim and stance as strongly as possible. Sorry. And make the reader understand that your aim is to persuade, then only to inform. Once again, the things we have discussed. So, generating ideas, brainstorming, that is the crux of it. You brainstorm ideas about the points, about the pro arguments which are in your favor, and then you also brainstorm about the opposing arguments. When supporting your arguments, you don't have to bother very much about it. You use facts, examples, quotes from authorities, statistics. Now, what are facts? Facts are data that have been objectively proven and are generally accepted, such as historical facts, scientific data, statistics. What are examples? There should be sufficient number of examples. You can give example from real life. And finally, you can give the opinions of expert in any particular field. Moving on. So there are three ways to refute a counter argument. Okay, refuting, we can claim that the counter argument is incorrect, it is irrelevant to the thesis statement, or it is insufficient. Now, what is incorrect? We demonstrate that the opposing view is wrong because it is based on incorrect or misleading information. So that is how we refute the counter argument, by stating that the opposing view is based on incorrect or misleading information. Secondly, we can also refute it by stating that the opposing viewpoint is inappropriate and unrelated because it is not relevant to the key point. So the we can state an opposing argument, counter argument, that is unrelated to the thesis statement, and then we can relate it on that grounds. Then insufficiency, showing that the counter argument is weak because it is based on insufficient information or ignores significant information. We can partially agree with the opponent's point of view, but on a whole, we prove that it is weak. Why? Because it is based on, that is, the opposing argument is based on insufficient information, or it ignores significant information which could make it strong. So these are the three ways in which we can refute counter arguments. Now, just go through it, okay? I won't be reading it. Just go through it, and I will ask you what refutation technique is used in here from these three: incorrect, irrelevant, and insufficient. So, assuming that you have read the paragraph, you know, the counter argument is that some people claim that censorship controls the way people think and feel, and that is basically that contradicts the ideals of democracy. But then we refute it by saying that PEMRA does not aim to control what people watch. Rather, it aims to regulate, okay, what is being shown on the screen. And this is not control of thought, it is not control of feelings. So definitely it is not against the principles of democracy. Okay, we can further state that these sort of regulatory authorities are there in all the democratic countries all over the world. So we have refuted it, that no, this is not an issue of democracy. Media censorship, some people claim that media censorship is is contradictory to the principles of democracy. And here we have refuted that no, this is not an issue related to democracy. So can you tell me which of the three refutation technique I have used? Just uh, give me back, go me back to now. Which of the technique we have used? Which of the three technique I have used in that particular paragraph? Either it is incorrect, that is the opposing view is incorrect, it is irrelevant, or it is insufficient. Which of the three? I hope you have guessed it by now. The technique which I have used is incorrect. Okay. Why? Now read the definition of incorrect. It is based on incorrect or misleading information. And what does information is? Yeah. That people say that it contradicts the ideals of democracy. No, this information is incorrect. Okay. This does not. You can also argue. Okay. Someone can also argue that this is also an we are also refuting it by the technique called irrelevant. That holds equally true, that the people are discussing, or they are equating media censorship with democracy, but we have refuted it by saying that this is not an issue of democracy. Okay, we can also say that it is irrelevant, apart from stating that it is incorrect. So either you can use either technique, and these techniques sometimes, may fall in gray areas. I mean, they are not black and white, but the main essence is that you refute it, okay, properly. You refute the counter argument properly. Now here, just read it again and tell me what technique is being used. So assuming that you have read the paragraph, why that which technique we have used? We have used the technique that the counter argument is insufficient. Why? Because some people say that, the decisions which Pamela takes are subjective. Yes, this sometimes might be subjective, but they are insufficient to refute overall the stance that there shouldn't be any media censorship. Why? Because overall, this type of interference helps control possible chaos in the society. It prevents us from moral deterioration. Okay, so it is insufficient counter argument. It is right to a some extent, we have acknowledged that, but it doesn't justify that, there shouldn't be any regulation. Okay, there shouldn't be any censorship. No, it is insufficient. It doesn't lend credence to the fact that the whole concept of media censorship should be discarded. So we have refuted it on the grounds that the evidence or the point of view is insufficient. Read it once again. Supposing that you have read this paragraph, now why is the technique we have used is irrelevant? The technique we have used in this paragraph is irrelevant because the opposing view says that, regardless if you censor the media, the censor the TV programs, people can watch the movies. They basically, the opposing view puts forward a stance that people can, they have alternatives. They can watch the horror movies, let's suppose, on CDs. But this counter argument is irrelevant because that is a different issue. Because CDs or DVDs, whatever it is, people can, individuals buy at will. Okay, but TV exposes its message to all the people. Kids are watching. Okay, you can't just uh, prevent people from watching TVs, and all of a sudden horror movies, show up at some channel. So these are the two different cases. So irrelevant. The counter argument is irrelevant. We have refuted the counter argument by stating that it is irrelevant to the thesis statement. So important reminder, when writing an argumentative essay, and our lecture is coming to an end, so if you just bear with me for a couple of more seconds. When writing an argumentative essay, arguments which have been suggested by opponents and proponents should be made clear. Otherwise, the reader may be confused. So, the first sentence of the paragraph which you write should clearly state that this is an opposing view. Okay. So this is how these are the various ways through which you can organize your argumentative essay. You can first state the pro arguments, then you can write counter arguments and refutations, and then you can write conclusion. Or you can, use this approach. You can write counter arguments at first, then you write pro arguments, or you can write counter argument one and refutation, counter argument two and refutation. Then you can. This is another approach. But what I would suggest is that you use this approach, model A. Okay, because first you prove to the examiner that why are you right, and then on top of that you are also elaborating to or telling to the examiner that in addition to why I am right, why the opposing side is also wrong. So it's an icing on the cake sort of model. Okay, you are justifying your claim by giving the examiner a two pronged approach. First you tell him why I am right, and then why potentially opposing arguments are wrong, and then you conclude it right after that. Okay, so this is the model which I would recommend. Of course you can use any model. So the common errors which students make while writing counter arguments: the refutation does not refute the counter argument. In other words, the refutation is irrelevant to the counter argument. For example, let's suppose the thesis statement is that the medium of university education should be Urdu. Now that is our stance. Okay, that in universities the medium of education should be Urdu. Now in order to strengthen our stance, we have written a counter argument paragraph. And what is that counter argument? That supporters of English as the medium of university education believe that English is the language in which most academic studies are published. Therefore, they maintain our education should be in English so as to be able to better understand and respond to these studies. Now, we have refuted this counter argument by stating that, but learning English is very difficult and not everyone can master it. Now, this refutation is not refuting the counter argument, which is basically this: that our education system should be in English so that we are able to better understand and respond to the studies which are published in English. Okay, this is the main counter argument, and we are refuting it by stating some irrelevant stating some irrelevant refutation. We are simply stating that English is very difficult and it is not everyone to master it. Rather, what our refutation should be is that the academic publications in English might be very difficult for the students to grasp. Okay, so it is better that we impose Urdu language at university education. Back to our thesis statement. But this is not a thesis statement. But learning English is very difficult. No, this is not our thesis statement. Our thesis statement is that the medium of university education should be Urdu. This is our thesis statement. We should be relating this to our thesis statement. So this is a common flaw in writing counter argument. Some other flaws: the I just don't you don't have to just read this slide. I'm just going to tell you orally what this means is that sometimes students have written a pro argument, okay, in pro argument about their thesis statement, and then when they write a counter argument and when they try to refute it, they are basically stating a pro argument which they have already mentioned in a body paragraph. So that creates a repetition. For example, let's suppose this is a pro argument. Okay, here this is a pro argument. Then you write a counter argument and you are refuting it by exactly giving this pro argument. Now, this shouldn't be done because this creates repetition, and never ever in your essay should there be a hint of repetition, be it writing conclusion, introductory paragraph, anything. There shouldn't be any repetition. Okay, so that is the gist of this slide. Okay, the final tips of an argumentative essay: find a debatable topic, Word your thesis carefully to provoke thought or action. Do research, make a pro con chart, outline your arguments so that they are focused and organized, anticipate objections and differing view support or your claims, avoid logical fallacies. You can read it just. So today's lecture, I hope today's lecture was useful, and I will just repeat what was discussed today at a very broad level. Today we discussed what is the difference between an argumentative essay and a persuasive essay. You know, in persuasive essays we don't write counter arguments, and in argumentative essays we write counter arguments, but the reason for writing counter arguments is to further support our stance. And how do we do that? We nullify the opposing stance, opposing view by giving different facts, figures. So that conveys a message to the examiner that number one, why we are right by giving different pro reasons, and then we also refute that why the potential opposing argument is wrong. So we are basically beefing up our stance in a two pronged way. But a word of caution, there are many potential mistakes which students make while writing counter arguments. So you should go for this approach, that is writing counter arguments, 3 to 4 counter arguments at the end of your essay, only if you're dead sure that you are not making a repetition, you are not refuting, number two, you are not refuting a counter argument by stating something irrelevant, and number two, you are not refuting the counter argument, you're refuting something else, and you have good vocabulary so that you can refute that. And number lastly, never ever state a counter argument so strong that you cannot nullify it. If you can make sure that you can stick to these rules, then writing counter arguments can be very productive. But if you don't have these skills, then it's my advice that you ignore the counter arguments. Just write the pro arguments or write a persuasive essay. Because at the end of the day, writing wrong counter arguments would be harmful to you as compared to not writing any counter argument at all. Okay, so with this I will leave you. That's it for today's lecture. I will meet you in the next lecture. I hope today's lecture was useful. If you have any queries, you can ask me later on. Thank you and Allah Hafiz.